So please, guys, please put a 1 in the chat if you have ever bought at auction or you would like to buy at auction. Please do share that with us so we have an understanding. So Joy, for those who are kind of new to property auctions, what would you say are kind of the key maybe things in an auction pack to pay attention to?
Well, does the property belong to the person who's selling it?
That's quite an important one.
Quite an important one.
Take that for granted then.
And well, no, because that was in the one that for me that didn't make it. That was the main problem to start off with. It delayed it to start off with because you couldn't see who it was. And to be fair, I've just been given one to look at for a client, which I was working on before we started. And that isn't, the seller isn't the named owner either. There is a document in there to confirm why the seller isn't the named owner, but it's very basic. And it's no good saying, well, it's not the named owner, but that person's selling it. Well, the land registry take a very different view to that, and they go, why is he selling it? Prove that he had the right to sell it. And that must be in the auction pack if it's not there. But people don't look at that. They look at they think the property is the most important. But that's the thing to start with, and to make sure you understand who's selling it. In this particular case, the one I'm talking about now, that I'm looking at the moment, there's a grant of letters of administration in there, so it's being sold by a personal representative. However, there may be that in the one that I'm talking about earlier, there was nothing in the auction pack to say how this person had authority to sell it. So it's really important to see that. So that's number one. And if it's not there, the first thing to do there, before you waste any time on it, is go back to the auctioneer and ask them why. Because the auctioneers upload the auction packs and they don't check them. So if there's something missing in it, they don't know because they haven't looked at them. That isn't what they do. They don't check them. They get sent an auction pack, they upload it, and it's...
So that's really interesting. So you would have thought, wouldn't you? Because I think, most of us are used to buying through, Rightmove, Zoopla, and they obviously are really quite heavily checked to go on to those. They sort of check them and they make sure. And obviously, generally, you'd hope that the agent has attended the property and they might take, the floor plan and things like that. So what you're saying is the vendor generally will create the auction pack and send it in to the auction house, and then they don't necessarily even check it.
They don't necessarily even check it, but most estate agents don't check who's on the title. So they don't get it. It would make sense, and everybody would think this, that estate agents would look at the land registry on the property they're selling. They don't. They believe what the land registry tells. They believe what the person selling the property tells them. So if the person hasn't told them they don't own it, they won't know. So they will. It can get as far as Rightmove on an ordinary, private sale, treaty for sale. It can still get on an auction pack. So it still can get on the Rightmove. So please don't think, never assume it. It would be your solicitor it will be something they check, obviously, when they look at it. I had one recently where the seller had got married, so I had a different name. I mean, it was fairly obvious it was the same person, but the land registry don't work on those principles, so I had to obtain her marriage certificate. So it isn't generally, that's one of the first things we check, which is one of the things you forget. So yeah, that's an important one. Sorry, carry on.
Oh, no, carry on. You were saying the second one.
The second thing to check is that there's a registered plan in the title pack.
So just to so for those people who might not know what a registered plan is, what does that mean?
So when you download title documents from the land registry, which is the only, I'm being very simplistic here, because there are still some unregistered properties around, but in most cases now, most properties are registered. So the solicitor or yourself, if you decide to do that, will download the land registry entries, which when I was a girl they called office copies, and I still tend to do that, which I try not to. But they download the land registry, and they come in two parts: the register and the plan. So if you should be only paying £3 for each one. Please don't go paying money for land registry titles on anything other than the gov.gov website, because they charge a surcharge.
Yeah.
So,
and it's very simple, isn't it? So if it's not a simple process, you're in the wrong place. I bought one last night, in fact.
Yes.
It is, really simple. So, I know sometimes there are third parties, aren't they, that charge extra. Make sure it is the government website. It looks like the government website.
It's landregistry.gov.uk, and it is £3 for each part. So £3 for the register and £3 for the plan. So I would expect. So the second thing I'd do is look at the plan and make sure the plan reflects what you're expecting to buy. So is that red line? The land registry occasionally ask about buildings on the site, but they are not that bothered. The red line is the area in which the property stands. So the red line you would expect to see is the garden, and you wouldn't expect to see any more than that. So those two things is the proper. So you've got your register, which shows the name of the person who's buying it, selling it, or who owns it, and the contract, which should show the person who's selling it. So those two need to match, and the title plan needs to show what you expect you're going to buy. If you haven't visited the property, at least look on Street View and Google Earth and things, and make sure that that's what you're expecting to buy. Obviously, visiting the property is the best, but that's not always possible, I know, with other people, but you can get the people who go and view it for you. I forgot what they're called.
Viewer. So you can get viewer, can't you? Or I always find as well, I think it's a really great point, Joy, is most of us have got fellow property investors all over the country, and especially newbies. That's really exciting experience for them to go and look at properties for others. So again, that's a really great sort of opportunity. But if not, Viewer is the name of it. View as in VIEWBER. So amazing, Joy. So I love that. But what are the kind of common pitfalls do you sort of see people falling into if they don't thoroughly read their auction pack? Now, please, if I may, add one in here. So I've got a chap who was kind of sent over to me by some professionals because they were quite worried that this particular chap didn't seem to know exactly what he'd bought. And I was really shocked when I went and visited him at the property, because he needed a bit of guidance of what to do. I mean, potentially it could have been a pretty good deal, but he knew absolutely nothing. And I was saying, what are the, what's the square meterage? What's this? Because that kind of helps you. It was actually a mixed use. So it was shop and uppers. So shop with flats above. And he had no idea. And then I asked a couple more questions, and I said, he said, I don't know, I haven't seen any of that detail. And I said, well, it would have all been in the auction pack. He said, I didn't read that.
Yes.
I was like, what?
What you have to understand is that when the hammer goes down, on the end of the auction, you have exchanged contracts. You cannot say, oh, I've changed my mind now. I don't know what I've bought, or and exchange of contracts is at that point legally binding. You've lost your deposit, and you can also be sued for the breaches, from any losses stemming from the breaches of that contract. So if somebody has lost out on something, or they sell it again for less money, it will always be you are liable for those breaches. So really, you need to be certain on that. You need to be certain on what you've bought. You need to have read the auction pack. You need to have looked at the special conditions, because the special conditions can double the price of your property.
And so is there like a particular place that people might find these special conditions?
They should all be in the auction pack. So when you go in, when you go to the auction, it says download the auction pack. And when you download the auction pack, one of the documents should be the special conditions. And that will include everything in the auction pack that which should have, I personally often, if I'm auctioning, don't put property information forms in. I like to see them when my clients are buying, but when they're selling, I try and get away with it. It is what it is. But you must, usually you would like to see searches in the auction pack. That's becoming less and less popular. People don't do that. You would expect, if there are searches, that the special conditions will have a clause which will remunerate the buyer for the seller for paying for the searches. You may see a clause for their legal fees in there. You will see the fee for the notice to complete. It has to be served. You will also see any other, and I've seen rent arrears. So you could be liable for rent arrears. Enormous amounts of other charges, like they may have had the property refurbished and you've got to pay for it on top of what they've done. So it's really, really important to look at the special conditions. And if you don't understand them, get somebody else to. One of the other things that often gets slid through is the reduction of the time after notice to complete. So notice to complete is usually 10 days. So if you don't complete...
For anyone who is maybe not understanding this, do you want to just clarify exactly what these mean?
So when you complete or you exchange at auction, you'll have 28 days generally. If you don't complete within those 28 days, they will then, the seller solicitors will then serve a notice to complete, for which you will pay them. And then that gives you then 10 days to complete. And if you don't complete within 10 days, that's where you lose your deposit. So thank you for giving, because as I said at the beginning, I find it hard that people don't understand. It's so long.
The rest of us mortals, we just need it in normal language.
So they will serve a notice to complete, and you'll have 10 working days to complete then.
So what you're saying is sometimes you think that you've got 28 days, but actually you might have less than that. So
often
28 days is already quite short, isn't it? Let's be fair.
Often they'll cut that in half, and you'll have 14 days to completion of the 28 days. You must remember they are calendar days, not working days.
Oh, really?
So they are, and for some reason the terminology changes. So it's 28 calendar days generally for completion, but when you serve a notice to complete, it's 10 working. And I never know why they don't do that. But in reality, you have 6 weeks to complete usually, which is adequate time. I won't say it's easy now because of lenders, and that brings us on to how you're financing it. But it's now increasingly common to reduce the time to 14 which makes it 10 working days, and then to change the period to completion from 10 working days to 5 working days. So cut your time for completion in half.
Wow.
And that's it's not doable unless you have the money in the bank. It is not doable in today's
it's kind of, it's cash, or because even bridging is not that quick anymore, is it?
Bridging can be longer. I've got a bridging loan I'm doing at the moment, and we've been on it 6 months.
No, don't tell me that. I'm still waiting for mine, as you know.
It's so ultimately what happens is, just because they've given you a bridging loan, it doesn't mean they'll lend on the property. They might have told you in principle you've got a bridging loan, but you haven't. You know, me or somebody like me is going to have to satisfy the bridger of the title, that they're happy with the title. If there is any squeak on that and they don't like anything, or there was something missing, or there wasn't a property information form and you have to answer all those questions, then they will all come back at you. They won't complete, they won't lend the money, because they won't take a single risk. And what I've also seen recently in special conditions, which I have never seen before, so that's what I mean about learning things. This is a week or so ago. They have put any requisitions raised after the auction are being charged at an hourly rate for their solicitor. So if you then go back, and if I've got 7 pages of bridging lenders questions, which is not unusual, it can take me a whole day to answer those questions. I'm then going to pass at least half of them, maybe more, onto the seller solicitor. They're going to have to come back with those. You are then going to be paying them in excess of £300 an hour to answer those, plus VAT, plus any disbursements that they might need to do if they need to get extra documents, or they need to go forward for something else. So never, you know, that doesn't make auctions cheap, but they are, the way the lenders have now changed with bridging is just ridiculous. You know, they're not prepared to take any chances at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so for me, one of the things I do when I have an auction pack, opening a file is a lot of work, because if you haven't opened the file and you've been successful at the auction, you're 2 or 3 days before your solicitor can start, because we're not allowed to do anything until we've done all the anti-money laundering regulations. And so if we haven't done them, if you get a please do these, they need to be done now. And so it costs so much money in time to open the file. I then ask the client to make the payment and then get everything sorted out. We've lost a day or two. Generally, you can't start work straight away. You could be anybody, apparently, and then the lender will, the bridger will do the same.
Yeah.
So they could be another 2 days behind.
Yeah. And it does seem, doesn't it, that you have to be so careful, because you know, you've already mentioned numerous ways that a property that you've just seen on an auction, I don't know, let's say you know, guide price £100,000, suddenly there's so many more things potentially within the pack that could be costing you, you know, I mean, I've heard absolute horror stories where, you know, property is up for 50 grand, but there's 50 grand's worth of arrears in rental and things like that. And then what we're talking about is even in the conveyancing process, you know, there could be absolutely considerable additional prices of this because they put these specific clauses in to, yeah, I mean, I suppose that you can sort of see they might put that in because they want people to do it quicker, but still, you've got to be absolutely, you know, so incredibly careful.
And what other people don't take on board about bridging finances, the interest is usually taken out of the loan initially.
Yeah.
So if you think you've got a bridging loan and then they tell you they're going to take 10 grand out, where are you getting that 10 grand from? I've just had a lender solicitor charge my client £6,500 plus VAT.
Wow.
On legal costs. So you also remember you're paying your lender's legal costs.
Yeah.
That's going to be off that as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the lender won't let.
And that is as going back to that point, if you don't know what you don't know, and this is where so many people, and I've seen it so many times, they come back, I didn't know this. And unfortunately, in this kind of scenario, that is not an excuse because these things are being thrown at you. So